All right, so this is going to be a fun little change of pace here, and hopefully I could provide you with something a little bit educational, especially something that could really help out for any aspiring animators out there. So, especially with my special guest star here, hopefully we will have some great tips about getting into the industry and knowing a little more about a lot of the behind the scenes work on what happens in animation studios. So, can you please introduce us?
Yeah, hi. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Jasmine Katatikarn. I'm a CG artist, entrepreneur, coach, and educator with over 20 years of experience in the animation and VFX industry. I was born and raised in the New York area, and I currently live in New York City with my family. So, with that 20 years of experience, over 10 of those years was working as a lighting artist at Blue Sky Studios in feature animation. The other half is in VFX, where I am currently working as a CG lead at Framestore, New York. And in addition to that, I'm the co-founder of the Academy of Animated Art, which is an online school where we dedicate our time to getting our students jobs in the animation and VFX industry. And also, me and my co-founder, Mike Tanzillo, are also the authors of the book Lighting for Animation. So that's a little tidbit of me, and I'm excited to be here and hopefully give you guys some helpful information.
Nice. So, it does sound like you do have a very interesting portfolio already, especially with your experience working at Blue Sky Studios. How is it that you found yourself in the animation industry, and how did you end up working for major studios such as Blue Sky Studios?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for me, in college, I majored in economics. So that's how you get into the animation industry. Major in economics. I decided around my senior year when I was applying to all the finance and investment banking jobs that I quickly did not want to go this route. And throughout my childhood, really, my whole life, I always gravitated towards creative things all the time. But I don't want to say unfortunately, but I was kind of veered to think like it's not practical. I'm never going to survive if I want to be an artist of any sort. So let's be practical. And well, actually, first I will say I was pre-med because I was told that I should be a doctor. And then I pivoted and I was like, well, the next practical thing is economics, right? So I went to finance. And it took me until when I was 21 to realize, like, no, it's time to pursue what I'm actually passionate about. And I decided to just take classes at that point, like Photoshop, like really basic classes, because I had never studied traditionally any kind of art except for, some fine arts on my own as a hobby. So I started taking like basic Photoshop, Illustrator type classes. And luckily, the person that was teaching me was actually into 3D animation. And he saw that I was picking it up so quickly. He said, take a look at this over here. And I think at the time it was 3D Studio Max. And I had never seen any 3D software before. I don't have that story where, I grew up like watching animated films and I knew I wanted to be an animator. I don't have that backstory. I just kind of stumbled in on it and I was like, this is amazing. And finally, I felt like alive. Like I found something that I really want to do. And from there, I did a small snippet as a product designer with the kind of my portfolio with the 2D stuff, but I always had the 3D in the back of my mind. I ended up going for a master's in digital imaging and design. And that's why I went in 3D. And so to make a long story short is after that 2 years of a master's while working full-time as a product designer too, I thought I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm going to be able to work in, 3D right now. And I did, but what I realized too is I didn't learn as much as it wasn't gonna be as easy as I thought. Like, oh, here's my degree, give me a job, right? And you gotta hustle and you gotta learn a lot of things that frankly, I wasn't taught. in a really expensive master's program. And that was really jarring to me. And that's part of the backstory why we created the Academy of Anime Art. But to get to how I got to Blue Sky is, at first I worked in VFX in New York City for about 5 years before going to Blue Sky as a lighting artist. My specialty is in lighting and look development. And I made that transition from VFX to feature animation. And it actually wasn't as easy as you would think, because we'll probably talk about it, but VFX and animation are quite different. And it was kind of by luck, to be honest with you. It was being diligent, being consistent, but also like being in the right place at the right time. Because at the time, I had applied to a lighting position and a materials position at Blue Sky, and lighting was looking for temp artists. And because I was local and they were in a crunch, they're like, we have nothing to lose on you, even though I was told later that my portfolio was not up to par for animation because it was more of a VFX oriented. I know, right? So it's like, after 5 years of experience, you think I'd be like, oh, I'm an expert. I'm awesome. I can do this. I was like a senior lighter at the time. And then all of a sudden later on, the recruiter or the head of the department was talking to me. He's like, yeah, I didn't think you were going to be that good because, you know, your portfolio really didn't show that. And that's also another reason why we created the Academy of Animated Art. It's just like, I had no idea after 5 years in the industry what I needed to put on my reel to actually get that job. There's so many aspects. And so I got my foot in the door at Blue Sky as a temp on Ice Age 3, I believe. And after then, they hired me. They wanted me on full time. And there was a small snippet of like a year that I just decided to go freelance back into VFX, but I did come back to Blue Sky. And I was there for over 10 years before I closed down. Ooh, nice. So it's a long-winded way of saying how I got to Blue Sky Studios.
And with your current company, Frame Store, or what is it again?
Yeah, it's Frame Store.
With Frame Store. Well, I can imagine that it was actually pretty tough after they revealed that Blue Sky would ultimately shut down. But was the process tough of going from Blue Sky Studios to where you are now with Frame Store?
The process in the type of work?
Yeah, with the work, with like trying to develop a new job. Because I can imagine that would be one thing that right now for many animators, considering how things can be very unpredictable, especially during these times, should animators prepare themselves always in case of sudden situations like this, where like the company that you're working with suddenly decides to close down. Should they brace themselves for that moment or be prepared to go and jump onto whatever next job they could go and find, or be like you and co-found a whole new studio?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the person, to be honest with you, especially with the whole co-founding a studio. That takes a very specific type of person. But I mean, I will say what I would recommend is not always, don't come from it from a place of fear, like, oh my god, what if I lose my job? I need to like always be on whatever, you know, preparing my reel, making sure I keep my connections. Instead of coming at it from a place like that, I would look at it, reframe it, and be like, you know, I want to keep myself fresh. Like, updating my reel every once a year is just a way to like celebrate everything I've done and put it together, like almost like a photo album. So, because, you know, honestly, I went 10 years without creating a demo reel, and then I was just like, oh my god, look at all this work I did. I never like sat back and was like, hey, you know, that's pretty cool. But if I had kind of diligently done it every year, I've been like taking a time to like praise yourself, because we rarely do that, right? We're just like going. So I would look at it like, yeah, be on top of it, like make it a habit to update your portfolio once a year, not necessarily because you're afraid you might lose your job, but be like, no, it's like, look at all the awesome things. And then after 10 years, every year you have a different thing to be like, oh, let me just watch what I did in, 2018. That was a great year. It's like a memory book. And then in that way, you keep yourself fresh, and it's in a positive way. And also what I would say, which also helped, I don't want to say helped with the closing of Blue Sky, but I talked with a lot of my, colleagues that we were all in shock, right?
Mhm.
I worked at Blue Sky for over 10 years. I had many friends that worked there for 20 years. And what happens is it was actually a little refreshing for a lot of people. It forced them to like pause and be like, wait, did I really want to work here? Or like, am I doing what I want to do? Or maybe it was just the easy way. It's so easy to just keep on doing what you're doing. The closing of Blue Sky allowed people to pivot in different ways. Like, oh, I actually want to try this over here. Maybe start that academy, right? Be motivated to do something that it was just so easy not to have to think about, but be inspired again, especially as creatives, where we always love to create and if you end up doing the same thing for too long, you could just get a little lethargic, and then that creativity spark kind of goes away. So a lot of people got like excited again. So if you're in like a job, maybe as you're doing your demo reel, like maybe evaluate, am I enjoying my job? Like, ooh, what else would I like to do? And then you always keep yourself on your toes so you don't kind of like get too settled and stop thinking about yourself and what you want. So if that moment does come, let's say your studio closes and 500 people are out of work, you're more in a good mental state for that situation. Yeah, so that's what I would say about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, that's honestly the most optimistic response that I've ever heard regarding that. And it's actually a good moral as well. Like, and it feels like something that doesn't just have to apply onto animation, but onto other different fields as well. Like, even for me, I do voice acting from time to time, and it does make me reflect, like, maybe that should be the kind of attitude I should do with my demos. So I can see where you're going with in terms of, like, updating your portfolio or your demos or whatever as like kind of a celebration for yourself and just like a reflection of like the things that you've done in the past. But just to go on to my next question that I have now, it's very interesting that you mentioned that you specifically work in lighting in animation, and that's honestly something that I feel like not many people actually talk about. Like, whenever people would discuss about animation, a lot of people would look into the character designs, the concept art, the character animation, or the background designs, but not many would go and look into the details about what goes into the lighting. So, can you describe a little bit of what is your job, or what was your job working in lighting for a computer animated feature, and what is the role of lighting in a CG movie? Like, how is that an important component to the animation?
Yeah, definitely. I always like to describe lighting as the invisible art of storytelling. It's kind of every aspect of animation is helping tell the story, and lighting is just the same. So I imagine you have a scene and it's black, right? It's dark because no lights are on. So in that, like in the very like base aspect, well, you need lights to even see what the animators are doing or what even the story is, right? So like being turn on a light there, it's like, okay, is that the job of the lighter? But it goes beyond that. It's kind of like when I say the secret, like the invisible storytelling aspect is good lighting. You don't see it, like you don't think about it because you feel it. It's like the emotions. The lighter kind of helps portray the emotions of the scene. So let's say an animator takes, does a wonderful animation of a really sad scene, right? Maybe someone passed away. I don't know. It's super emotional. And there's so the lighter gets it, and it's a dark scene. So we start putting lights in it, and it would be a very different read from the viewer if the lighter would, let's say, put really bright sunlight and like a very happy, rainbows in the background type of feel, versus imagine that lighter made it really moody and put like kind of like an overcast day, or maybe a strategic sun ray or a spotlight that's just like focusing the viewer on the emotions of the eyes, whatnot. That's what lighting does. So it kind of helps tell the story and hits that emotional beat that you don't realize. And it's also and part of that is like the mood, creating the mood of the scene, right? But also we're kind of directing the viewer where to look. Because when I kind of hinted at it, where I was like, yeah, we're going to strategically put a spotlight, like a very soft spotlight on the eyes, let's say, right? So the viewer is going to look there. It'd be very different if we put a spotlight in like a background character and kept this guy over here in dark. Where's the viewer going to look? They're going to look at wherever we highlight, the brightest part of the scene, or we work with contrast. It could be the darkest against the bright. So really it's like crafting the mood, directing the viewer's eye, and really helping tell the story in this invisible, like impactful way through color. And to me, it's funny, I never gravitated towards animation. Like, I think it's very two different personalities, an animator versus a lighter. I still remember in grad school, like when we had to do it, like we did the whole pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. Animation, I'd like animate something in the day. I'd be like, that's good, it moves. And then when it came to lighting, I would like noodle that thing for like weeks and be like, no, but that look. So I often say, my co-founder has a good analogy, like when you look at a film, what speaks to you most? Are you looking, do you really enjoy the acting? Like, do you look towards the acting, or are you looking more of like the cinematography, like the overall look? Like what speaks to you more? And of course, if you're focused on the acting, maybe you're more likely to be an animator. If you're more like, oh, that's just beautiful, then maybe you're more inclined to be on the lighting side.
I see. And it is true, like, that lighting does play that role to really set the mood more so than, like, any of the actual acting or stuff like that. It is true when you do think about it. It's well, I don't want to say, like, it's something that people take for granted, but one thing that I do find very fascinating is something that you did mention earlier, and that is the difference between animation and visual effects, where they are two completely different things. And especially if you want to try to work in either of those fields, then they require two completely different portfolios or two different requirements. Can you tell us more about the details of the big difference between animation and visual effects?
Yes, I can. They are very two different, although the techniques and the tools are pretty much the same between the two, like software, 3D knowledge and all that. They're different mindsets. And to be honest, I had forgotten about that after, I started my career in VFX, then I went to animation, and then I'm back in VFX. And my first month or so back in VFX, I had this like startling revelation. I was like, I'll share it with you. As you can tell, I like to make analogies with things. As I was working in VFX, and I was like, wait a minute, this is the difference of baking and cooking. So like, I'll explain. So I was like, okay, when you cook, like someone that likes to cook is generally not the same person that likes to bake. Like a baker is usually a very specific person, and a cook is a different type of person, right? And what are the differences? A baker has to be super precise with the measurements. Like if anything goes off, it's usually like your baked good is, there's something could be wrong with it, right? It's like you got something off. It's never going to be right. It tastes horrible, and there's something just off about it. But a cook can just like throw things around. Let me try this. Let me try this. Be a little bit more free flowing, creative with it, and it could be. I mean, it could be disastrous, but it could also be a masterpiece, right? And it's never like a cook is more likely to be like, I don't really have a recipe. I'm just going to throw things around. But a baker would never say that, right? They have like precise measurements. If you don't do certain things at certain times, it's going to be off. So that is animation and VFX. Animation is the cook, where it's kind of like, yeah, of course you have your foundation, your basics that you need to do with, but you kind of have the creative freedom to just like, try things here, throw things around, and it's awesome. You have the freedom of color. But VFX, you're often, matching a backplate, a shot footage, and it also gets really technical when you're matching that kind of stuff with the film, the cameras, and all that stuff. So if you get just like one thing wrong with the technical part, or if it doesn't match just right, you're just looking at that and you're like, it's just not right. There's something off about it. Because you just like miss that precise measurement, maybe. So that is VFX. So there's another analogy. So if you're a baker, good at VFX. I could do this all day. And if you're a cook, go to animation. So that is my way of explaining the difference between animation and VFX.
And just out of curiosity, for you personally, would you consider yourself, which one would you prefer, working in animation or working in VFX? Or in your analogy, are you more of a cook or a baker?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely candid, I am totally the cook in the family. My husband's the baker. So yeah, if I were to put myself in those shoes, I am more, I mean, I can bake, like I can do VFX and it'd be awesome. I do personally prefer cooking and having that like freedom to just throw things around.
We are pretty much at the point where, well, this is kind of inevitable to talk about, but it's safe to say that the pandemic has really changed things in our lives, like personally and even professionally. And there are some reports where some people are having a harder time, and there are some others that try to adapt. In the case of animation, it seems like it's one of those mediums, or it's one of those professions in the entertainment field that is adapting well the most, where we see a lot of people that are working at home, and yet they are still capable of producing some amazing works. Even in 2021, we have seen plenty of great examples of animated movies that people have worked during the pandemic, and they still come out with amazing products such as Raya and the Last Dragon, The Mitchells vs. the Machines, Luca, and several others. What would you say is the benefit of working in animation during the pandemic?
Well, the best part is, yeah, we were able, as you said, to adapt really nicely to working from home, and there was really no hiccups. I mean, when I say no hiccups, of course there was like hardware and whatnot, from everything in the entertainment industry specifically, where film projects were just delayed and suspended. Any live action animation could keep on going, and it was relatively seamless, and it was nice that it kind of proved that it was doable, because for years, especially with the larger studios, there was talk, like people, I still remember friends would be like, well, can't you work from home? You do animation. I was like, no, security reasons, all these reasons, all the reasons why they said you couldn't work from home. Well, the pandemic kind of forced many studios to make it work quickly, and then we proved that we were able to do it. So I agree. I feel like, we're really adaptable, but the biggest benefit was it showed how animation can be done anywhere. And we don't need to be in the studio necessarily to output great work together.
And just out of curiosity, like with some of the projects that you were working on at the time, were they mostly local people that used to work in the studio, or did you also get international people involved?
Yeah, so for, for all our, yeah, usually it was all local people, like people that were working in the studio when we went remote. It was all the same people that, which was a real benefit to have that relationship with people beforehand. And I think, we'll get into what the challenges are, but it's really good to have that relationship with someone going into a remote situation. And I mean, I was never in the situation where we scaled, within Blue Sky, where we've worked with international or other people, but, working in VFX now, we work between studios, and freelancers come in and go from all over the place. So, I mean, I see it happening now in real time, where also the pool of artists, you're not only limited to someone that can come into your office. All of a sudden it's like, oh, you have a computer? Let's do it, And I mean, that's a huge benefit too. It opens up a lot of talent that may not have been there before.
Yeah, of course. And I was just asking because I remember a few months ago, I actually talked with an animator, and he managed to work on Space Jam: A New Legacy while he stayed at home in Ireland. And he was working for a studio that was in Toronto that was handling a lot of the cleanup work. So that's what I was wondering, because now with this pandemic and as time would move on, I'm starting to see more international animators like working in their own country and their own homes, where they get together to work on major projects, such as what I mentioned before with Space Jam: A New Legacy. But one thing that I do wonder, because, well, let's be honest, the pandemic is still something that has been tough for all of us. And I can
Mhm.
imagine, like, even for you personally, this pandemic was tough, or maybe not. I could be wrong. But also, I can imagine there can be some setbacks professionally that does come with adapting to working at home, especially for major projects. What would you say are the challenges of working in animation during the pandemic?
Yeah, of course, with any pros, there are cons. So there are challenges from working from home. So I think the main challenges are, creative collaboration, right? Especially doing something creative among artists. It's very hard to do that on Zoom and video calls. So that it's just that feeling of like being able to sit in a theater and to review your shots, right? Where we're all sitting around and everyone can kind of chime in, and it's like this energy that is really hard to reproduce. So that's one thing. This is kind of more organic creative collaboration. The other thing I'll say is training. Like training from the work from home is very hard. Like coming in or like starting, I kind of hinted like it was really nice at Blue Sky. The people that we were working with, I had worked with for 10 years. So it was like not skipping a beat, right? You're like, oh, okay, I know the pipe, I know everything. But starting a new job, because I started a new job in the pandemic, the training aspect of that was really difficult. The social aspect is really difficult. Trying to not have these relationships with someone that you've never met in person. And also, I will say, like, for training on the junior level, like, as someone that's a junior, gains so much from learning, sitting next to, let's say, a more senior artist, and kind of just getting like snippets here and there, or I miss it because I started new and learning a new pipeline, a new company. Like, there's probably things I just don't know very well because I haven't been able to be like, hey, what's this? But like, how do you guys do this? You know? And I joked with my friends, I'm like, I'm very senior, but at some level, I'm very junior because like, there's probably some base things in the pipeline I just haven't been able to just ask someone easily how to do. And then the other aspect is social, right? Social is going to be hard. How do you get those social connections, especially when you start remote? That is a challenge. And I do believe that there are probably ways. I want someone to have, like, if you're listening to this, they have like super creative solutions on how to kind of do these things remotely, like start initiating. Like I'm trying to think, like training is such a big thing, like onboarding a new artist remote. There's so many ways that we could do it that it's just not there because it's still so new, that we could definitely address. But yeah, creative collaboration, training, and social aspects, I'd say, are the three main challenges from working from home.
I see. Yeah, that sounds about right. And like even if you don't work in animation, that does sound very relatable. Rather it be personal or even like for other professional jobs as well, especially with the social aspect. That it's hard to really connect when technically the only thing that does connect you to other people is the internet. So it's very understandable with what you are talking about. Now, my next question, this might be a little bit tricky, and this would require more just your opinion, but I'm just trying to reflect upon what would be in the future. Like, I know that everybody is excited for the day for this pandemic to fully be over and we can return to our normal lives. But things have been very different, especially with the way that we have been adapting with the pandemic and the stuff that we have learned from it. So what I want to know is, in your opinion, how do you see the future of animation? Do you think everything would just return to normal and even the major studios would demand everybody to just go back to the studio to work on the animation there? Or will studios, big and small, be more adaptable when it comes to working remotely or working with animators at their homes to work on their projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's on everyone's minds, right? Anyone that works in the industry, or not even in this industry, and any person that's working remote, is what's going to happen. Because honestly, there are a lot of pros from working from home. And I did have our last president of Blue Sky, I heard him say something like, it would be crazy to think to have these artists taste what it's like to work from home and then be like, come on guys, come back in 5 days a week. It would be like really hard, right, to make that transition. But that being said, I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I think it's going to be mixed, right? There's a lot of eyes on it, a lot of people wondering what's going to happen. I feel like a lot of, and this is purely my opinion, so there's no backing on this.
Okay.
Just to preface that, but yeah, I think it's going to be mixed. I think maybe studios are also looking at other studios too to see what they do. But I mean, personally, I could see the major studios going back in person. Like 3 to 5 days a week, just because they have the facilities to support that, and they have the artists, right? Like the artists want to work at Pixar, they want to work at the Disneys. They'll be willing to go back in person, and they also really value that. I mean, not that other studios don't, but like it's that creative collaboration that I think is very prominent. But I really feel like the mid-size or the smaller studios will be kind of the really interesting areas where they're going to like greatly benefit from the cost savings too from working from home, not having that in studio, but also the amount of talent, right? All of a sudden they have all these talent pools that they can dive into, because honestly, if the major studios, let's say, go back 5 days a week, you're going to have a big bulk of talent that's like, well, what can I do remote? Like, I like remote, and I think it's going to be a nice hybrid. Well, there are going to be hybrid situations, like, 2 days. I think that's actually the best solution, because it's like you kind of have 2 days in person, then, other days remote, something like that. So you get the benefits of both. But I do think what's going to happen is studios are going to kind of find their own priorities, what they want, what they think is going to be best for them. And what's that going to leave for the artist is that more options, right? Let's say the 5 days a week doesn't work for you. Let me go see. There's going to be studios that decide to do. There's already studios that are saying they're doing full remote, right? So then, okay, I know my priority is full remote. So let me go find a studio doing full remote. So I actually think it's going to be really great. It's going to diversify the industry and the type of work. So not only, so instead of like, I picture on LinkedIn or something, a click box, like, it used to be like relocation, like, are you open to relocation or whatever? There's going to be a click box now, like only remote, full remote
Yeah.
versus, or like hybrid or something. So that's going to be a discussion in the negotiations and whatnot. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's just going to add a lot more flexibility and freedom if you want it, and options, which I think is great.
That is interesting. That definitely is, and I can imagine how things can, like, there are both, like, some ups and downs and some benefits where, like, you could bring in people who would work remotely. So I guess only time will tell to see
Yeah.
what the future shall hold for us and for animation. But Jasmine, I will say this has been a wonderful time. I've had a blast just talking to you and just asking you these questions. Now, there is one more that I would like to ask you, and this is for everyone who is watching this, that if there is one advice that you would like to give to the viewers, one piece of advice for any aspiring animator or for anyone who wishes to go into the animation industry, what would be the advice you would like to give them?
I would like to give them something I wish I had done. Slow down to speed up. And what I mean by this is, I want, like, in your mind, you're like, I want to get into animation. I am going to open this software. My goal is to learn this software, just make something really fast and put it on and, like, go apply. But really, what I've seen, because I've done demo reel reviews, and in our experience with the academy students too, the best thing that you can do is to nail the foundation first. So when I say slow down, I said slow down. Like, you will get to the software. Software is secondary. That's a big thing we say at the academy, because software changes all the time. But what doesn't change is the foundation, your eye. What, for an animator, the movement. For a lighter, like, color, like, how do you create the mood of the scene? Instead of like, what button do you push to create a light? Be like, back it up, slow down, get the foundation right. When you have a good foundation and you're solid, then you can, make anything of it, and, learn any softwares, and you can make anything beautiful. Like, when I say in lighting, you can make anything beautiful. Animation, you can animate anything, like, amazingly if you get the foundations first. So I know we're all impatient. I know I am so impatient, but slow down, get the foundation, and then you will thrive and speed up so quickly in your career instead of trying to go too fast.
Yeah, that is a beautiful lesson, especially on the age of the internet where everything wants to be so fast, but sometimes we need to be reminded to just slow things down. So thank you so much for all this, Jasmine. And by the way, considering that you have often mentioned about this animation academy that you have, where can people find it?
Yeah, you can find us online, Academy of Animated Art. We also have a YouTube at Academy of Animated Art. And yeah, you can find us there.
All right. So thank you so much, Jasmine. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. And I hope that you all have probably learned a lesson or two about the animation industry, about getting in, or hopefully have been inspired for you to go and, as Jasmine said it best, to slow down to speed up. So with all that said, I would like to go and say thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, see you later, dudes.
See ya.